We're going to talk about tongue trust today. There's been much published on this topic, and yet there's still a lot of misconception about tongue trust. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a lot of talk about tongue trust, and then much of the publication after that covered the topic. Yet still today, there's a lot of people believe that tongue trust will cause an open bite, and there's been a lot of misconceptions about it. So I thought it would be a good idea to kind of to cover the subject. A lot of times when you see a patient with an open bite, a lot of doctors think that the open bite was caused by the tongue trust, but actually that's not the case. And there's been a lot of publication about the topic, so you can read about it in a Prophet and Fields book. We know for a fact from laboratory studies that tongue trust can't really cause open bite, because when you have this what's called a tongue trust swallow, the tongue pushes against the anterior teeth, and a lot of doctors will believe that causes the open bite. But actually, from laboratory studies, we know that during the day, about 800 times a patient swallow, and at night only maybe about 200 times. So you only have about 1,000 swallows a day that people have. And whenever you swallow, you only push against the teeth about a second, what the journals will show. So really, you have about 1,000 seconds a day of the tongue trust swallow pushing against the anterior teeth. Now, if you divided it up by 60, it's only a few minutes. So you can imagine, let's see, if you put like a clear liner trays on your teeth and you only wore it for 1,000 seconds a day, you would essentially get no tooth movement at all. So from that, we know that since the tongue trust swallow only pushes against the teeth for about 1,000 seconds a day, it cannot move teeth, and that's really is the fact. So tongue trust will not cause an open bite, and that's been well established by lots of journals and textbooks, and it's been written about it many different places. And also the other misconception is that when patients have this tongue trust swallow, they have a stronger force against the teeth. But actually, they actually measure this in laboratories, and actually that's not the case either. When patients have this tongue trust swallow, the force against the anterior teeth are not greater than patients who have a swallow with the tongue against the roof of the mouth. So it's been well established that tongue trust will not cause an open bite. So why do we see an open bite and a tongue between the teeth? Well, that's a whole different scenario. Well, you can have, for example, if a child had like a finger habit, like they have thumb sucking, and that created an open bite because the thumb is between the teeth a lot of the times, maybe half the night or during the day. Now that will create an open bite because it's a constant force between the teeth. And now the patient has this open bite, and they can't eat or drink because food will spill between the teeth. So what they do is they put their tongue between their teeth just to create a seal, and so they kind of have this tongue trust swallow, we call it, but that's not the cause of the open bite. It's really just an adaptation to it. So don't get confused between what caused the open bite there. Now you see also these tongue trust swallows in adult patients, and I'm going to show you an example here where patients will have their tongue between their teeth when they swallow, and you would say, well, okay, so in that case it caused an open bite. But actually, in a lot of those cases, what's happening is patients had for various reasons, and usually it's like a large tonsils or airway issues, they adopted this open mouth positions where they became mouth breathers. So the tongue dropped from against, when normally you want your tongue against the roof of your mouth, and when you swallow, and that maintains the upper arch. Now, these patients with, for example, airway problems, like let's say, for example, they have a large tonsil, or that's the most common issue. What happens? They become these habitual mouth breathers, and the tongue drops from the roof of the mouth to a lower position, and a lot of times low and front, because the patients are trying to breathe, so they have this new tongue position which is down and forward. So now their tongue is not supporting the upper arch, so now the upper arch slowly starting to narrow, and now these patients have even less room to put their tongue between their teeth and keep it up high on the palate. So the upper arch starts getting narrow, they starting to get more of an open bite and a longer face because the tongue is down and forward, and now their tongue is always between their teeth, so they have this resting down and forward tongue position. So now that will create an open bite because the constant force of the tongue between the teeth will constantly push on those teeth because it's between the teeth at rest. And that will create an open bite. And you notice, for example, you get patients who, let's say they had a stroke and they can't move their tongue, or they lost control and the tongue is drifted to one side. A lot of times you see on those patients that the teeth completely pushed over, or they have a big posterior open bite because their tongue is always between their teeth because they lost control over their tongue because of a stroke, for example. So these patients with, for example, tonsil issues, and we used to call this adenoid face, and you can read about this again in a Prophet and Fields book, where they have this longer face and they have a down and forward tongue position. A lot of these patients will get an open bite, and when they swallow, they swallow with their tongue between their teeth, and they do that because otherwise they will have food spill out from their mouth. So it's I think it's very important to kind of understand this. So again, just try to remember that the tongue thrust does not cause the open bite. It's more of a seal in response to an open bite. So when you see an open bite, you gotta try to get to a bottom of it to see what could be causing it. In children it could be, finger habits or thumb sucking. In adults, as well as in teenagers and children too. A lot of times it's a sign of, let's see, enlarged tonsils that the patient just can't breathe. And then a lot of these children, you will see a tongue position that is down and forward, and it's between the teeth all the time, pushing, creating a constant force on the teeth, and that will create an open bite. And a lot of these patients will have this habitual swallow where they put the tip of the tongue between the anterior teeth. And I can show you an example here. So here is a great example. This is an adult patient who had a large open bite, and it's a classic example for this. She had airway problems and large tonsils for years and years that was not addressed. She had a tongue position that's constantly down and forward between the anterior teeth, so she got this open bite. And when she swallows with the teeth between the tongue between the anterior teeth. So you can see as she swallows, she puts her tongue there to create a seal. It's a very hard habit to break. In normal positions, your tongue should be against the roof of the mouth, okay, with teeth are touching or near contact, and the lips sealed. And that will create a well-maintained arch in most of the cases, because the tongue against the roof of the mouth is going to hold the upper arch in balance against the forces of the cheek muscle. If you lose the balancing force of the tongue against the palate and the upper maxillary teeth, the cheek muscles, the muscles of mastication, it's just going to push that upper arch together, and you're going to end up with a narrow arch. And because of that narrowing of the arch and the down and forward position of the tongue, you're also going to have the elongation of the face, and a lot of times an open bite. So I hope that answered the question about the tongue thrust and the tongue thrust swallow. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let us know. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you catch the new videos as they come out. And I try to cover topics that I get a lot of questions for. And we have our monthly webinars, usually the second Saturday of each month at 9 o'clock in Eastern Standard Time. So if you have any questions, please shoot us an email, and have a good rest of the week. Bye.